In this tutorial, I'm going to do an overview of the desktop area of Premiere Pro, explaining what is it that we see when we open up Premiere Pro. So I've already kicked off Premiere Pro at this point. I'm going to go through some more of the common panels that are used inside Premiere Pro. So in the desktop area of Premiere Pro, at the very top we have our main menu, which you're very familiar with if you've done anything inside any of the Adobe programs. Right below the main menu is the toolbar. This used to be over here to the right of our timeline sequence. Now it shows up here at the top, right underneath the main menu. Underneath the toolbar we have what we call the project panel. Now what we're seeing here is dependent on which workspace we're using. Over at the far right at the top we see a workspace option with a drop down. I'm in the editing workspace, which is the workspace I use most often, but there are other workspaces as well. So if you want to follow along with me, make sure that this workspace says editing, and if it still doesn't look like my desktop, you may want to choose the option to reset current workspace. That takes it back to the default setting for the editing workspace. Okay. So the top left here we have the project panel. The project panel is where all our assets are stored. And we have various types of assets. In this particular project I only have clips showing up here, but we could have audio clips, we could have still images, could have Photoshop files, Illustrator files, etc., etc. So all our assets are stored inside the project panel. So if I want to bring an asset from the project panel to our timeline, we simply click and drag it down into our timeline. We have another panel inside what we call this panel group, the Resource Central, and there's also templates there. Below the project panel on the bottom left hand side of our screen, we have 4 more tabs making up this panel group. And the ones that I probably use most often in this panel group is the media browser. I may use the media browser to go bring in clips from my hard drive. Just click and drag them up into my project panel so those clips become a part of the project. And the other tab I use here is the history panel. If I want to go back some steps that I've done most recently, I can use my history panel to do that. Okay, so we see here in these 2 different groups of panels we have individual panels as well as what we call a panel group. To the right of our project panel we have our source monitor. This is what we use to do editing on our clips. So I can click on a clip in my project panel, drag it over to source monitor, and do editing in the source monitor of that clip before I drag it down into my timeline. And I use timeline. Timeline is the same thing as a sequence in Premiere Pro. We have several other tabs available to us in this panel group. The effect controls we use if I want to set specific parameters on how effect is applied to a clip. I can do that inside effect controls, and that's beyond the basics tutorial. Audio mixer is if I want to do some mixing with my various audio tracks down in my timeline, I can use my audio mixer to do that. And the metadata tab allows us to add metadata information to our project. And then to the right of that panel group we have the program monitor. The program monitor is used to preview our project. So whatever we place down in our sequence or our timeline, we see that in our program monitor as we scrub across or as we play through the timeline. If I press spacebar to play my timeline, we see the project up here in the program monitor. Then below our source and program monitors we have of course the timeline or a sequence. We could have multiple sequences in a project. If I want to do another sequence, over at the bottom of my project panel click on the new item icon and choose sequence. I'm just going to take the default settings here, click OK, and now we have another sequence inside this project. The reasons you might use multiple sequences are a great way to break down your project. If I'm doing a project on, say, the training options that a company provides, they might want to highlight Class A, Class B, and Class C. So I might have a sequence set up for each of those classes. As I put together the different classes, I have Class A sequence, Class B sequence, and Class sequence. And then I'll do a master sequence where I combine those 3 sequences into the master sequence or the final sequence. So I have sequences nested inside other sequences. So multiple sequences are very handy, especially in larger projects. To the right of your timeline, we have our audio master panel, and this I use when I'm finishing up a project that has audio. This project does not. As I play through the project, I'll see green, yellow, and hopefully not, but sometimes red bars show up over here. That just tells me how the overall volume of my project is doing. If I'm going into the red areas, I want to tweak back the volume a bit so to eliminate those red bars from happening. And I think that covers the entire desktop that we see here. Now there are other panels available to us that are not shown here. All panels are available to us via the window option off the main menu. So if I accidentally close a panel, which does happen, I can find that panel underneath the window menu. We can also move these panels around. Say I want my effect controls, instead of being here with the source monitor, I want to place it over here with my project panel. I simply click on the tab of effect controls and drag it around so my mouse is still pressed. And I'm paying attention to this blue area. The blue area tells me where it's going to place this panel. If I want it to be inside this panel group, I'm going to release my mouse when I see the blue area, the dead center of that panel group. And now effect controls becomes a part of this panel group. If I had released, I'm going to grab on effect controls again, so I'm going to click on the tab, drag it around. If I had released it where the panel shows up either top, bottom, left, or right, it kind of creates its own little panel group. So effect controls is now another panel group to the right of the panel group that's on the left that consists of the project panel and resource central, and to the left of the source monitor. Okay, so I'm going to click on effect controls panel again and place it inside the panel group that contains the source monitor. So you can change those panels around. If by chance you do change your panels around and you want to get back to that particular workspace area, like you have set it up, you can actually save your workspace by clicking on this drop down from the workspace option on the top right of the desktop and choose new workspace. Call it my own workspace or whatever you want to call it. I'd probably call it something a little more descriptive. Click OK. Then that workspace becomes an option available to us on this drop down, so you can always get back to that workspace if your panels are shifted around. And that's a quick overview of the desktop of Premiere Pro.